Everybody's working towards their future. Some people put money into a savings account to better themselves for retirement. Some people go to school and educate themselves in order to make more money in their career. And some people exercise to make sure they'll be healthy for the rest of their lives. Not many people think about the environment, though, and how to take care of its future. The problem with our environment now is that it's slowly decaying, and it affects all of us because we all contribute to the environment decaying for the most part. I myself spend a lot of time outdoors through all the activities that I do. And looking into the Office of Nuclear Energy, Yale School of the Environment, and the New Atlantis, I've come up a way to help save our future and help save our environment. Today, I'm going to convince you that the US should adopt more nuclear power plants by discussing the problem of high CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, why this is a problem, how we can solve that problem, and what other people think about it. With the problem of rising CO2 emissions in the atmosphere, many people don't think about it because you can't see it in your daily lives. But over time, we have seen it. CO2 emissions in the United States is the second highest in the world. The USGS says in 2017, 32.5 billion metric tons of CO2 were released into the atmosphere. Of that, 5.1 billion tons is from the US. The Office of Nuclear Energy states that this nuclear power plants avoids more than 470 million metric tons of carbon each year, which is the equivalent of removing 100 million cars off the road. They are stating that nuclear energy can help save our lives and save our future with our environment. Increased risks of continuing with our current energy practices are as follows. The US is very dependent on other countries for oil and other fossil fuels for ourselves because we don't have many here. Both mining and burning fossil fuels create CO2 as well. So the whole process of getting the fossil fuels creates CO2, and then the burning of them obviously creates CO2 as well. The traditional power plants that we use today are unreliable and are not always running and needs a lot of uptake. And also the problem with global warming is a huge problem. The cause of all this is CO2. CO2 is basically burning fossil fuels, which examples of that are oil, natural gas, gasoline, coal, stuff that's mined out of the earth, basically. Driving cars releases CO2, power plants burning coal, burning natural gas releases CO2, and industrial and agricultural activity also creates a lot of CO2 as well. This takes place all over the earth, as I stated before. We all contribute to it in some way, shape, or another. Um, Ranking wise, China is the biggest polluter with 10.06 billion metric tons of CO2 released per year. The US is second with 5.41 billion metric tons of CO2, and India is third with 2.65. The reason why we do it is A, because it's efficient for us to get. B, it's convenience, it's easy for us to mine, and with that comes with also it's cheap to mine. Easy to use, cheap to mine. Richard Rhodes states that nuclear power can be and should be one major component of our rescue from a hotter, more meteorologically destructive world. The solution I have come up with and researched is to build more nuclear power plants. These power plants are reliable, they run 24/7. Unlike a traditional coal plant, the fuels in these reactors last 1.5 to 2 years, whereas a coal plant, you're replacing the fuel every day to every other day, depending on how much energy consumption you need. Um, there's no CO2 emissions, which means we're not burning any fossil fuels with this whole process. These nuclear power plants take up the same setup as a traditional power plant with the steam turning the turbine. Um, As I said before, there's no burning of fossil fuels. And this right here is probably the safest path for a carbon-free future. Um, these nuclear power plants are also safer than much power plants running today. Coal plants actually release more nuclear waste into the atmosphere than nuclear reactors do. These nuclear power plants are highly regulated, so there's not really much room for error. And today's designs of nuclear power plants are safer than they ever were in the future. Canada and the World Backgrounder states that, as of today, nuclear energy is considered one of the most environmentally friendly sources of energy as it produces fewer greenhouse gas emissions during the production of electricity as compared to traditional sources like coal power plants. Now, some people may say that it's not really zero carbon because mining uranium and building these plants both release CO2. Now, I'm not here to deny that fact because that is true, but you also have to take into account that mining all those fossil fuels and building those power plants also releases CO2 as well. So, no matter what, CO2 is going to be released from all this, and it's very minimal. There's not nearly as much mining for uranium as there is for coal and oil and stuff like that. So, those still release much more CO2 than running through uranium does. And other people bring up, is it really safer because of the Chernobyl disaster and the Fukushima disaster? Both of those, the Chernobyl was a mistake on the engineers' part who were running the plant that night. They were not that they weren't certified, but they were not paying attention to what was going on and they were being lazy with their work, and that's why that happened. Fukushima, a tsunami came, and it's hard to put the blame on somebody because some people say that the plant builders should have thought about that beforehand, and the other thing is that Japan doesn't get a lot of earthquakes out there, so like it's hard to put the blame up for that one. The New Atlantis, a journal of technology and science, states that he wants us to believe that the best available science shows that nuclear energy has always been inherently safe, that our current nuclear reactor designs, he insists, are the safest and surest path to a carbon neutral future. Basically saying, as I've been stating, that I think nuclear energy is the best way to go in order to reduce our carbon usage. Um, in review, we have a huge problem today with high CO2 emissions. This problem is caused by the burning of fossil fuels and the mining of fossil fuels. We can solve this problem by building more nuclear power plants and no longer being afraid of them. And even though the opposition may say that they are not safe, now with our future, as I stated before, many of us are preparing for it. We should take a look into the environment as well, because if our environment's not safe nor healthy, then our future is not going to be safe or healthy either. What I want for everybody today is not to understand what a nuclear power plant is, but understand how a nuclear power plant will help us in our future and maybe educate more people about how safe they are and how that they will help our future in the long run.